I want to give you a hypothetical scenario. This man right here is Jacksonville Jaguars running back Travis Etienne. And I think it's fair to say that the former first-round pick did not have a great year in 2024. Aside from the fact that his team, the Jaguars, was a complete mess, Etienne was a problem. His yards per carry average was really bad. He did not have good rushing numbers in any category, and the offense looked significantly better with anyone else in the backfield. Tank Bigsby outperformed him by a lot. Jags fans like myself still have nightmares over that Week 1 fumble against the Miami Dolphins as he was walking into the end zone that probably would have sealed the game and maybe changed the course of the entire season. Anyways, I want you to imagine that Etienne gets traded to another team. It doesn't really matter what team it is, but let's just say that for the purposes of this hypothetical, it's the Buffalo Bills. And after getting traded to the Bills, Etienne says that the Bills and Jaguars run pretty similar offenses, except for one key difference. That key difference is that the Bills' offensive line does not suck. I can actually run behind this line. I actually have holes to operate with. I can do things. Putting your former offensive line on blast like that would be bizarre. Not just because you rarely see guys throw their offensive line in the fire, but because you were literally the problem. The offense was better when you weren't in there. Seemingly everyone else could run behind that line and have success behind that line, but you. So calling them out when you were the problem, almost like a student saying that the teacher sucks because he failed a test when the class average was a 94 and everyone else passed with flying colors, is just insane. Well, I bring that hypothetical scenario up because this man right here is San Diego Chargers running back Jeff Queen. And in 1972, he did something awfully similar to that. Because after Queen got traded away from the Chargers, he had some, shall we say, not so flattering remarks about his former team. Even though, as you'll find out, those remarks made no sense and seem to come out of nowhere. There's being complimentary toward your new team, and then there's whatever the heck Jeff Queen did, and it backfired in spectacular fashion, to the point that it deserves a deep dive more than half a century later, especially because there's a twist at the end of this that's gonna blow your mind. Because this is the story behind Jeff Queen, otherwise known as the running back who threw his offensive line under the bus for all the wrong reasons, and how one comment derailed a career. Make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel, because we post every single day on here about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL with stories like this one that you might not have heard of before. So if you like that sort of stuff and want to learn more and join this community, then this is the place for you. Thanks in advance for liking and subscribing and for helping us grow this community. And with that in mind, let's talk about when Jeff Queen did not treat his offensive line like kings. Before I talk about the actual incident in question and what exactly Jeff Queen said that raised some eyebrows, we need some context to understand just who this man right here, Jeff Queen, is, and how he did with the Chargers. Already, the fact that Queen was in the NFL was an accomplishment in itself. He was drafted in the 12th round of the 1968 NFL-AFL combined draft with pick number 317. Of the 26 players taken in that round, 17 of them, or over 65%, never even so much as played a single snap in the league. And only 6 players played 3 seasons or more, meaning that they survived the AFL-NFL merger. Jeff Queen, against all odds, was one of those 6, as the Morgan State running back caught on with the Chargers for quite a few seasons. I should note that this 12th round was unusually good for talent at the high end, as he had some absolute legends in there, like 4-time Pro Bowl tight end Bob Trumpy of the Cincinnati Bengals, and 5-time Pro Bowl wide receiver Harold Jackson, who finished his career with over 10,000 yards receiving. But that's neither here nor there. The point is that Jeff Queen was a productive NFL player for a decent amount of time. And while not great by any means, as we'll soon find out, Queen absolutely had his moments with the Chargers. During the 1971 season, he found the end zone 7 times, being tied with running back Mike Garrett for the most touchdowns on the team. As a side note, you can learn more about Mike Garrett by clicking the card in the upper right corner. He was one of the most productive players in football over the final 2 weeks of the 1971 season, as despite the games not meaning anything for the Chargers, as they finished the year below 500, Queen found the end zone 4 times over the final 2 weeks. In a 27-27 tie against the Oakland Raiders in 1970, with the Chargers trailing 27-13, Queen helped start the comeback and helped the Chargers salvage something out of the game when he caught a 65-yard touchdown pass from John Hadle in the 4th quarter. And on Monday Night Football, during Week 9 of the 1971 season, in a 20-17 win over the St. Louis Cardinals, the Chargers scored 2 touchdowns, and Queen had both touchdowns, with both of them coming in the second half in the winning effort. You can learn more about that game and just how bizarre it was by clicking the card in the upper right corner, because I promise you, that game had one of the dumbest decisions by any coach in the history of Monday Night Football, and I do not say that lightly. Bottom line, Queen could play in this league. However, before the start of the 1972 season, he was traded away to the Oakland Raiders, getting traded to a division rival that was otherwise fine at running back, seeing as the Raiders have one of the best rushing attacks in football the year before in 1971, finishing 3rd in rushing touchdowns, 8th in rushing yards, and 4th in yards per carry, and seeing as the Raiders weren't losing any key pieces from that rushing attack. Why the Raiders needed him, I'm not sure. Why they gave up a 3rd-round pick for him, seeing as he didn't really fit in anywhere, and seeing as they knew prior to picking him up that he was hurt and was nagging a hamstring injury and wasn't signed yet, I'm not sure. Al Davis was a bizarre general manager in a lot of ways, and this was one of his more puzzling trades considering the lack of a need that the Raiders had. More on that trade in just a little bit. Still, the Raiders saw a chance to acquire a guy who they thought was talented, and a chance to hurt their division rival in the process, and they pounced on it. Just like that, Jeff Queen was going from one AFC West team in California to another, and was trading in the powder blue for the silver and black. And when Queen got to Oakland, he was thrilled. In fact, maybe he was a little too thrilled, because after settling into Oakland, he came to a realization about his NFL career. Man, my offensive line in San Diego absolutely sucked. As Queen said about the Raiders, the offense is a lot like I'd learned at San Diego, but with one big difference. Oakland has a hell of a blocking offense. Running behind that line is sheer fun. The key phrase in there is one big difference. If Queen just said the second part of that statement, then this is a non-story, and this is your generic player speak that is forgotten about all these years later. Heck, it's forgotten the next day. Breaking news. Player praises his offensive line. More at 11. But to say that there was one big difference between Oakland and San Diego, with that being that Oakland was fun to run behind, and with Oakland having a good run blocking scheme, well, that implies that San Diego is the opposite. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a big difference now, would it? In other words, Jeff Queen said, Oakland knows how to run block. San Diego? Not so much. I didn't have fun running behind those guys in San Diego. In Oakland? Man, I'm having a lot of fun. And there's a few problems with this statement, and with Jeff Queen of all people throwing his former offensive lineman under the bus. Number one, the Chargers were not a bad offensive line by any means when it came to opening up holes in the running game. San Diego finished in the top half of the league in yards per carry, and they had some absolute dogs on that front. You had Walt Sweeney at right guard, a man who absolutely should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, as the man made it to 9 straight Pro Bowls and All-Star games from 1964 to 1972, and he had another fantastic campaign during 1971, starting all 14 games and earning more accolades. Russ Washington was the right tackle, and he was not just a former first-round pick, but he was an awfully good blocker, and one of the best players in Chargers history. By the time his career was done, Washington would start 196 games for the team and make it to 5 Pro Bowls while receiving a handful of AP All-Pro nominations. At left guard was Doug Wilkerson, another former first-round pick who would play 15 seasons in the NFL, start 195 games for the Chargers, and would become a 3-time Pro Bowler and an anchor on that offensive line for a decade and a half. Trashing your offensive line if they were dead last in run blocking and had a bunch of scrubs? Alright, that's one thing I suppose. But trashing this offensive line? Trashing an offensive line that featured a combined 17 Pro Bowls and was one of the better lines in football? That just seems like a poor lapse of judgment. Again, not criticizing Queen if he said that he believed that the Raiders have the best offensive line and best run blocking in the entire NFL. But to say that the big difference between Oakland and San Diego was that Oakland could run block and San Diego couldn't just isn't true. But here's what makes this statement by the man been watching this entire time in Jeff Queen even more bizarre and downright comical. Jeff Queen was just about the only player on the Chargers who could not run the ball in 1971 and find holes consistently. Everyone else was having fun. Everyone else was able to have success behind that Chargers offensive line on the ground, except for Jeff Queen, which, I don't know about you, but that sounds like a him problem. It's like playing a game of basketball. If everyone is missing shots, maybe you could argue that the hoop is crooked, or the ball is deflated, or something's not right. But if you're the only one missing, and everyone else is making their shots, then making those excuses is foolish and ridiculous, because no one else seems to have that problem. In 1971, Jeff Queen averaged 3.3 yards per carry, which is really poor and is well below the league-wide average. There were 8 players on the Chargers, including Queen, to run the ball at least twice. Literally all of those guys had more yards per carry than Queen did. He was dead last on the team in yards per carry amongst every player to run with the ball at least twice. As a team, the Chargers were above the league-wide average in yards per carry, averaging 4.1 yards per carry. Already, that's not too shabby. If you take Queen's runs out of the equation, the Chargers actually improved significantly and jumped from 13th at 4.1 yards per carry to 8th at 4.4 yards per carry. If anything, Queen held the Chargers back. Queen wasn't seeing the holes, because it sure as heck seemed like everyone else was. Queen wasn't making the right cuts, because it sure as heck seemed like everyone else was. Queen wasn't making the right reads, because it sure as heck seemed like everyone else was. You get the idea. I get why you want to trash the Chargers' offensive line after finishing the year 45th out of 53 runners with at least 90 carries in yards per carry average. But you were the only one who had any sort of difficulty. This wasn't a team-wide problem. This was just a you problem, especially considering all the talent on that line. As an example, Jeff Queen had -1 rushing yards against the Broncos in 1971 on 3 carries. This means that if you're watching this video right now, you had more rushing yards on October 17, 1971 than Jeff Queen did, even if you were not alive. The rest of the team averaged 5.9 yards per carry. When you've got negative yards per carry and the rest of the team is hovering around 6, again, that's not a team-wide issue. That's just you not being good. Against the Minnesota Vikings on December 5th, in a stunning 30-14 victory, Jeff Queen had 14 carries for 39 yards, averaging under 2.8 yards per carry. The rest of the team, running the ball 18 times between Mike Garrett and Jerry Levias, averaged over 6.1 yards per carry. That's not a team-wide issue. That's a you issue at that point. You get the idea here. Jeff Queen trashing his offensive line by saying that unlike Oakland, they sucked at run blocking contradicts all the other evidence out there. And I'm not sure how much fun Queen had running behind that Raider offensive line, because his career after leaving the Raiders was rough. Because when all was said and done, Jeff Queen finished his Raider career with 4 carries for 10 yards. I know it's a sample size of 4, so it's nothing of substance, but the grand irony of all of this is that he finished his Raider career with fewer yards per carry than what he had in San Diego, despite trashing the Chargers' offensive line. From the time he joined the Raiders until the time he played his last snap in the NFL in 1974, Queen had just 17 yards rushing after those infamous comments. Maybe, just maybe, the offensive line wasn't the problem. Maybe it was you. It's me. Hi, I'm the problem, it's me. Hope it was worth it, though. Hope those words you got off your chest were totally worth it. So, as a word to the wise, don't trash your offensive line. You can praise your teammates and praise the people that you work with, but to throw your predecessors under the bus in the process by saying that there's a big difference between the two environments might not be the smartest move. But just in general, if everyone else seems to be doing something right except for you, and everyone else seems to be thriving except for you, then you need to be introspective. Stop making excuses and look at yourself to see what you can do differently. Blaming others for your problems when no one else has these problems is not a good choice. And Jeff Queen found that out the hard way in 1972. Because in playing card terms and values, after leaving the Chargers, Jeff Queen's career became not that of a queen, but that of a joker. Oh, and just out of curiosity, I did say if the Raiders trade away a 3rd-round pick to get Queen. What did that pick become? I'm sure it didn't amount to much of anything. You're kidding me. Good job, Raiders. Really nailed that trade. Hope the 10 rushing yards you got out of him were worth it. Check out our live streaming schedule for the next few days. We're live every single day on this channel, whether we're covering a sporting event or playing GeoGuessr or just taking your requests. So make sure you like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single time that we go live and so that you can join this community. Also, thanks to all our members and our Patreon supporters who get exclusive perks like their name of the end of each video, members-only Q&A streams, and cool emojis to use on videos and during streams. See how you can join this community and become a member or a Patreon member by clicking the link in the description below.